9. Wacy Garon Miklis. 38-year-old Wacy Garon Miklis already had an extensive rap sheet when he stole a pickup truck earlier this year and sped through the streets of Oklahoma City, hitting speeds of up to 95 miles per hour and blasting through red lights. His lengthy list of past crimes include bank robberies, grand larceny, and robbery with a dangerous weapon. But Miklis took his reckless behavior to a new low when he drove fast enough to lose control of the stolen truck and smashed into a car being driven by 28-year-old Star Shells. Sadly, the innocent young mother died in the crash. She was 5 months pregnant and left behind 2 sons. And several other people came close to dying that day when Miklis narrowly avoided hitting their vehicles. He had sped off when officers tried to pull him over, triggering an intense police chase that unfortunately ended in tragedy. Star's surviving family members hired a lawyer who told the Oklahoman that police made the situation even more dangerous by chasing Miklis into a crowded area with a lot of people in it, especially during the busy early morning hours. Miklis faces a slew of charges, including first-degree murder by eluding, felony attempting to elude, driving with a suspended license, reckless driving, and being under the influence of methamphetamine. 8. Kelsey Rose Hauser. Kelsey Rose Hauser was a passenger in a stolen car being driven by someone who gave police no choice but to open fire. When the 25-year-old found herself caught up in a high-speed chase in El Cajon, California in early 2016, it must have been terrifying, but she probably did not expect to die. Tragedy unfolded after police tried to pull over the red Toyota that Hauser was riding in with driver Jeffrey Sims, 2 other passengers, and a dog. After briefly stopping twice, Sims put the pedal to the metal and accelerated the car towards an officer who was getting out of his patrol car. The policeman quickly pulled out his gun and fired 4 or more bullets towards the vehicle, which smashed into 2 squad cars before coming to a stop. No officers were injured, but Hauser and the dog both died. Detectives told the press that they believed Sims and Hauser were fugitives with warrants out for their arrest. They charged Sims with attempted murder of a police officer and felony evading. The 2 surviving passengers were arrested on drug-related charges. A team from ABC News did its own digging and found that Hauser had a felony warrant out for her arrest for repeatedly failing to show to court in another county for drug possession charges. She and Sims were also wanted in Colorado on felony warrants. 7. Darren Ogum. In early 2019, police in Britain were pursuing a vehicle driven by 42-year-old Darren Ogum, a crack cocaine addict who didn't have a valid driver's license or car insurance. The chase only lasted 14 minutes, but the damage was far-reaching and permanent. While driving in his wife's car along the Aston Expressway with flashing lights in his rearview mirror, Ogum hit speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. At some point, he drove across the road and began driving in the wrong direction, directly into ongoing traffic. Ogum's vehicle finally came to an abrupt stop when he crashed into a Ford Fiesta being driven by Police Community Support Officer Holly Burke. He hit the car so hard, Burke died instantly upon impact. The suspect told police that he had panicked because he didn't want them to seize his wife's vehicle. He admitted that he smoked crack shortly before the chase. Ogum was sentenced to 9 years in prison and was banned from driving for 16 years. The prison sentence he received can only do so much to comfort Burke's friends and family, but at least he's behind bars, where he can't take any more innocent lives. 6. Death of an innocent bystander. One man was truly in the wrong place at the wrong time recently when he was struck suddenly by a Houston Police Department vehicle that the driver lost control of during a high-speed chase. It happened early in the evening when a woman contacted the police saying that a group of young men had held her at gunpoint and stolen her truck. The dealership she bought the truck through was able to track it, so she gave the location to law enforcement. When officers tried to pull the vehicle over, the driver sped off. The chase eventually ended with 5 youths jumping out of the truck and making a run for it. Police managed to capture 3 of them and charge them with aggravated assault. Right as things were starting to wind down, an HPD unit veered off the road and crashed into a sidewalk pedestrian, killing him in the process. Emergency personnel tried to save the man's life, but it was too late. The 2 police officers who were in the vehicle that crashed had been with the force for less than 2 years. They were placed on administrative leave while the situation is being investigated. This is just one example of tragedies resulting from police chases in recent years. A 2015 study found that high-speed police chases have killed at least 5,000 innocent bystanders and injured tens of thousands more since 1979. The actual number is likely even higher, according to researchers, because there's not really a solid established system for keeping track of these statistics. But people are aware that it's a problem and have increasingly called into question whether it's worth it for law enforcement to chase suspects for anything other than extremely serious crimes. And there's a growing movement to discourage police from relentlessly pursuing people for minor offenses. On the other hand, some members of law enforcement have pointed out that the majority of the time, when someone flees police over a minor offense, it's because they are guilty of something more serious and know that they might get caught. Plus, as Milwaukee Police Detective Michael Crivello pointed out in a 2015 USA Today interview, letting criminals think that they can get away with their behavior only encourages them to commit more crimes and take bigger risks, putting even more lives in danger. 5. A close call. Pritchard, Alabama resident Ashley Howard is lucky that she wasn't on her front porch the moment a suspect's vehicle crashed into it, causing major damage to her home. The impact was intense. Howard told local news station WPMI that she actually thought she was going to possibly die at first. Police from the Mobile and Pritchard departments were chasing a pickup truck when the driver lost control and rammed into her house, tearing down the structure rails. The driver was gone by the time Ashley got outside to see what happened. Now she's caught up in a miserable game of trying to see who will pay for the damages. Ashley doesn't have homeowners insurance, and both the Pritchard and Mobile police are denying any responsibility in the matter. In fact, they told her that the suspect will have to pay to fix the deck, if and when he gets caught, and who knows when that'll happen. Even if he is caught, it doesn't mean that he'll ever repay the money, and pursuing it could prove to be extremely time-consuming and stressful. Have you ever had a close call like this? Tell us about it in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 4. Lewis Walker. While out on patrol in Evansville, Wyoming in the early hours of the morning, police noticed an SUV blow through a red light and jump a curb into a car wash parking lot. Officers followed the vehicle into a hotel parking lot where a passenger got out. But the driver ignored their commands and sped off with 2 other passengers inside. The chase lasted for hours. Thankfully, there was little traffic, so the pursuit didn't come at the cost of putting many other motorists or innocent bystanders' lives at risk. As the SUV approached the town of Glen Rock, officers prepared ahead of time by laying a spike strip in the road. The vehicle ran over it and popped at least 1 tire, but the driver was undeterred and got onto the interstate. Even after one of the front tires came off, the suspect continued driving at 90 miles per hour. As the vehicle rolled along on its front rim, spewing sparks onto the pavement, it pulled over, let one of the passengers out, and then went back to fleeing. The man who got out of the SUV told police that the two remaining suspects had weapons and wouldn't go down without a fight. Officers once again deployed spikes, and the driver continued to evade capture. But as they were about to learn, you can't run forever, especially with deflated tires. The vehicle hit some rocks over a drainage ditch and finally came to a stop. After chasing the SUV for 58 miles, police took the suspects into custody at gunpoint without incident. They found a loaded handgun that thankfully didn't get used. The driver, Lewis Walker, admitted that there were drugs in the vehicle and reportedly confessed to having used cocaine before the chase. He faces multiple charges, including eluding police officers, reckless endangerment, possession of a controlled substance. 3. Vanessa Armstead. At the beginning of 2021, 32-year-old Vanessa Armstead received medical treatment after getting into a car accident in Utica, New York. The next day, she allegedly walked into an ambulance storage facility and stole one of the vehicles. She led police on a 137-mile chase across the state. State troopers tried to stop the ambulance just 12 minutes after the unauthorized driver got behind the wheel, but Armstead refused to pull over. She got off the thruway in Rochester, smashed through the gate of a yacht club, and drove the vehicle straight into Irondequoit Bay. Vanessa swam to a private boat that was out on the water and was taken into custody. It took divers and a crew from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office over an hour to retrieve the ambulance. Police charged Armstead with felony charges of third-degree burglary and second-degree grand larceny. She was held on $3,500 bail. Vanessa admitted to stealing the ambulance but told investigators that she had no idea how she got to Monroe County. It's probably safe to say that this argument won't hold up well in court. 2. Joshua Swartwout. Police were baffled when a 23-year-old suspect named Joshua Swartwout managed to steal a Kansas Highway Patrol vehicle and drive it more than 30 miles while handcuffed behind his back, hitting speeds of 100 miles per hour along the way. Swartwout was being transferred to a detention facility following an arrest on suspicion of car theft when he saw the perfect opportunity to escape. The officer driving the vehicle pulled over to help with a serious motorcycle accident, and since Joshua was riding in the front passenger side with no partition or rear seat cage separating him from the driver's seat, while the officer was preoccupied helping the crash victims, Swartwout slid behind the wheel and took off. A high-speed chase ensued, but the car eventually started running out of gas. So Swartwout pulled over and continued the pursuit on foot. Police quickly caught up with him and apprehended him, but they didn't ask how he managed to drive with his hands already cuffed behind his back. Kansas Highway Patrol spokesperson Trooper Ted Hillerman told ABC News that he assumed Swartwout drove using his knees, which is admittedly impressive, especially considering how he traveled through narrow stretches of highway with a ditch on each side. 1. Brian Sorby and Adam Craner. About a month ago, someone called the police in Lapeer, Michigan, and reported a reckless driver in a Chevy Malibu who was speeding and ignoring traffic lights. The vehicle reached speeds of 120 miles per hour during the ensuing chase. Toward the end of the half-hour-long pursuit, the driver, 20-year-old Brian Sorby, tore through a cornfield and then went briefly back onto the road. Then he crashed the car into a drainage ditch. A panicked Sorby got out of the car and ran into a pond. Thankfully, deputies eventually managed to talk the young man into cooperating with them. Sorby's passenger, 18-year-old Adam Craner, had started to run away, but was more compliant than his friend and quickly caved to the officer's commands. Both men were taken to jail where it was discovered that alcohol played a role in their behavior. Craner soon learned that it paid off to be cooperative with the police. He faces fewer charges than Sorby, who will soon answer in court for allegedly fleeing, assaulting, and resisting a police officer and operating while intoxicated. His $10,000 bond was also set much higher than his more compliant friend, whose bond was set at $1,000. All things considered, both men are tremendously lucky that they weren't seriously injured driving at such high speeds and barreling through intersections during red lights. And as Sorby learned, the longer you drag a chase out, the more serious your charges are likely to become.
Number 10. Shailene Woodley. In 2016, actress Shailene Woodley was arrested in North Dakota while participating in a protest against an oil pipeline project. Shailene recorded her arrest as it happened on livestream. If you're not sure who Shailene is, think Divergent, or The Fault in Our Stars, or even The Secret Life of an American Teenager. She hasn't got a lot of work in the last few years. It may have to do with the fact that she went to a construction site with about 200 other people to protest the pipeline, which was due to cross 4 states. She was just one of 27 people arrested on charges of criminal trespassing and participating in a riot. It wasn't really much of a riot, more like an angry group of people who weren't interested in having a pipeline rip up the sacred indigenous land and damage the environment. The actress was just 24 years old when the cops arrested her. As the arrest was happening, with 40,000 people watching her live stream, she said the cops had singled her out because of her fame. But in the end, she didn't really get in that much trouble. Things are going pretty well for her nowadays anyway. And last we heard, she's dating football star Aaron Rodgers. She also hasn't gotten in any big trouble since the pipeline incident. Number 9. Ryan Coogler. When Marvel's Black Panther came out, it was an enormous hit across the globe. This was partially because of how great a director Ryan Coogler is. He, the amazing actors, and everyone involved in the film made it a huge hit. But in January of 2022, Ryan was arrested for attempting to rob a bank. Wait, what? Yes, the director of one of the biggest movies of the past decade was apprehended by the police when he requested $12,000 in cash from the teller at a Bank of America in Atlanta. You can bet this never would have happened to Chadwick Boseman. May he rest in peace. The problem with being a director is that even though your name is on the movie, nobody really knows what you look like. The bank teller definitely didn't know who she was dealing with, and she called the cops to report a robbery in progress. It all started because Ryan handed her a note that said he wanted to withdraw the $12,000 from his checking account. The note asked if she could count the money somewhere else, as to be discreet. We don't know why he wanted the money, but that's none of our business. We also don't know why there was a black SUV with 2 people in it waiting for him outside. Again, it's none of our business. For some insane reason, the cashier thought she was being robbed, even though he asked her to take the money out of his checking account. She called the police. When the cops arrived, they put the director in handcuffs and arrested the people who were waiting for him in the SUV outside. Ryan was understandably upset. He was in Atlanta filming the sequel to the first Black Panther when the arrest happened. We don't know exactly what unfolded afterward, but know that Bank of America apologized profusely. Ryan also said that the bank worked with him to address the situation to his satisfaction, presumably meaning he was handed a nice stack of cash for his troubles. Number 8. Lil Kim. Lil Kim, the famous rapper, was sentenced to spend 1 year and 1 day in prison back in 2005. She was also given a fine of $50,000. And it was all because she lied to a federal grand jury to protect a group of friends who were involved in a shootout in 2001. 1 year and 1 day might seem like a long time, but it was a lot better than the 20 years she very well could have gotten. Her punishment was considered lenient. The rapper's real name is Kimberly Jones. The shooting she was involved with happened when her group crossed paths with a rival group of rappers called Capone and Noriega. One of the songs the other group had recently released contained an insult to Lil Kim, which was apparently enough to make them start shooting at each other. It happened just outside the radio station Hot 97, with one man getting injured, but nobody actually dying. When questioned about what happened, Lil Kim said she didn't know the men involved, but it was a lie that she revealed by video footage showing them together. as well as eyewitness reports. Lying to the judge about a daylight shooting put Kimberly behind bars. Number 7. Oscar Pistorius. Oscar Pistorius was labeled the most inspirational man in the world in 2012. He was the very first disabled man to run alongside able-bodied athletes at an Olympic event. He represented South Africa and actually came pretty close to winning. He didn't win, but it was still historic. He almost became an Olympian, even without proper use of his legs. The one cool thing he did get out of it all was his nickname, Blade Runner. Alas, Oscar's celebrity status came crumbling down the year after. On Valentine's Day in 2013, he got into an argument with his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. She locked herself in the bathroom of their home in Pretoria. As she was hiding from him behind the door, he pulled out his gun and shot 4 times through the wood. When he finally got the door open to see what kind of damage he'd done, Reeva was dead. When questioned by the police, Oscar tried to lie. He claimed an intruder broke into the house and shot his girlfriend. The police didn't believe it for a second, and the investigation proved he was a liar. He was initially sentenced to 6 years in prison, but had that increased to 15 years in 2017. What other cases can you think of when a celebrity role model went so horribly wrong? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Devin Ratray. In the 1990 movie Home Alone, Devin Ratray played Kevin's older brother, Buzz McAllister. He hadn't been seen in much time since then, a few shows here and there. But in 2021, he found himself back in the spotlight in a big way for punching and strangling his girlfriend. At 44 years old, he was arrested and charged on 1 count of domestic assault and battery. It happened on December 9th, with police in Oklahoma City being called to the Hyatt Place at around 3 o'clock in the morning. When they got there, a woman told them Devin had beat the snot out of her. He threw her onto the bed, strangled her with one hand, while he used the other to cover her mouth. She bit his hand and strangled to get away, and that was when he started beating her. It was a pretty vicious assault, yet the woman refused to press charges against him. In the end, all the cops could do was make him leave and spend the night in another hotel. There were no arrests made at the time. It wasn't until the police were able to issue an arrest warrant that they could put him behind bars. He had his bond set at $25,000 and was released later that day. Number 5. Anthony Starr. The star of Amazon's hit show, The Boys, was arrested in Spain in 2022 for getting into a pub brawl. He's not the main star of the show, but definitely one of them. His name is even Anthony Starr, so you know he's the real deal. He's the guy who played the Homelander, the boys' version of Superman. Anthony was in Spain shooting a new movie for Guy Ritchie, along with Jake Gyllenhaal, when the event took place. According to the local police, Anthony, who was 46 years old, attacked a 21-year-old chef at a pub. This was no gentle attack of words either. Anthony punched the chef twice and then smashed a glass in his face. The man was left bleeding and in need of stitches, and Anthony was hauled off to jail. The star was given a 12-month suspended prison sentence. He was also fined just over $4,000. If you're not sure what a suspended sentence is, let us explain. In Spain, any conviction of under 2 years is automatically suspended if the culprit has no previous criminal record. This means the sentence is considered already served. Anthony isn't actually in jail and will get to go on filming his movie. Number 4. Tiffany Haddish. Police officers in Georgia responded to a 911 call at about 2:30 in the morning on a Friday in January 2022. They were called because a driver was discovered asleep at the wheel on the side of the road. By the time an officer with Peachtree City came across the vehicle, the woman inside had woken up. The cops pulled the driver over as she was parking in the yard of some random house. As it turned out, the driver was actor and comedian Tiffany Haddish, and she was wasted. She was arrested and charged with a DUI and transported to the Fayette County Jail. Tiffany had starred on a handful of TV shows, but her most famous role was probably in the movie Girls Trip. But for all her fame, Tiffany's life is currently in shambles. In an interview with Entertainment Tonight that came out just before her arrest, she admitted her life is a mess. She said she's been crying a lot. Her dog died. One of her closest friends died. She was separated from her partner after a relationship of over a year, and apparently, all of this accumulated in a drunken night on the road and passing out at the wheel of her car. Number 3. David Koechner. Even if you don't know his name, you definitely know David Koechner's face. He played in The Office, he was in the Anchorman films, and he's been in countless other comedies. You might know him as Todd Packer or as Champ Kind, but no matter which name you know him as, it turned out this guy is a criminal. He was arrested on New Year's Eve in 2022 for drunk driving in the middle of the afternoon in Simi Valley, California. According to what law enforcement told TMZ, they received a phone call from a concerned citizen about an erratic driver. David ran a stop sign in a residential neighborhood, crashed into a median, and then fled the scene. Cops tracked down his SUV and gave him a field sobriety test, at which point they saw he was 1.5 times the legal limit. It wasn't even dark out yet, and David was already wasted and cruising around. He was booked and released later that day, and is scheduled to appear in Ventura County Superior Court at the end of March. Number 2. The Celebrity Gardener. Daniel Malgoires was a famous celebrity in France. He was the most popular gardener in the entire country and the proud owner of the best garden in France. He wasn't exactly a movie star, but he was a pretty well-known guy. He became even more well-known in 2017 when he murdered a burglar during a bizarre extortion attempt on his wife. It happened on the evening of October 5th. The couple finished dinner and 2 men in hoods entered their property. Daniel went outside because the dog was barking, followed by his wife, Francoise. There was an altercation with one of the thieves, and Daniel fell into the grass, covered in blood. His wife was then subdued by the thugs and brought into the house. Shortly after, they brought Daniel into the house as well. That was when they started making threats, saying they were going to beat Francoise if she didn't give them the code to their safe. All the while, Daniel urged her to do what they said so that nobody got hurt. She became suspicious and refused to give up the cash she had hiding in her safe. And that was when Daniel shot one of the burglars at close range. This was a very bizarre case. Daniel had orchestrated the whole thing just to get the money from the safe for himself and to divide it with the burglars. He hired them with the help of a man named Richard Lopp. Richard was given 8 years in prison for helping to organize the burglary. The burglar who wasn't shot to death, Richard Bruno, was given 7 years. And finally, Daniel was sentenced to 18 years for murder at the age of 72. And it was all so that he can get whatever his wife was hiding in their safe, even though the couple was ridiculously wealthy and lived on a property bigger than most neighborhoods. And number 1, James Beeks. Broadway actor James Beeks was arrested in November of 2021, just before performing in Milwaukee. He was part of the Jesus Christ Superstar tour, but also happened to have some connections with the American extremist group called the Oath Keepers. Why was James arrested? He was apprehended in connection to the events that took place in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. He was part of the group that breached the U.S. Capitol building. His charges included obstruction of Congress and unlawfully entering a restricted building. James probably didn't think he was going to get in much trouble, considering a lot of time had already passed. Plus, he was doing very well for himself playing Judas in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. But for his participation in what happened that day in DC, his career has gone down the toilet. He was suspended from the tour and probably won't be getting much work in the future. When you're part of a riot, you don't exactly come up on the short list for Broadway productions.
Number 9. Ashley Judd. Ashley Judd has carved out a comfortable living as a high-profile actress, but in her spare time, she's a passionate activist who's eager to trade the glitz and glam of Hollywood for a much more modest existence as she works to make the world a better place. Last year, the starlet traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo to do some conservation work in the remote Bonobo Peace Forest, which is home to an endangered primate called the bonobo. Things took an unexpected turn for Ashley, though, when she tripped over a fallen tree and broke her leg. She laid on the forest floor for 5 hours while awaiting rescue, and that was just the beginning of what turned out to be a harrowing 55-hour journey to safety. Once help arrived, her Congolese friend reset her leg bone without anesthesia, causing her to go into shock and lose consciousness from the excruciating pain. A group of acquaintances then carried Judd back to their camp on a hammock. From there, she was transported to the city of Jolu on a motorcycle. Then she took a helicopter to the capital city of Kinshasa. Judd was then flown to a hospital in South Africa, where she received treatment in an intensive care unit. The altruistic actress posted a video on social media expressing her gratitude towards those who helped her access services that most locals themselves cannot afford. 6 months after the accident, the media reported that she was walking again. Number 8. A frozen nightmare. Located among the scenic slopes of a volcano in Russia's remote Kamchatka Peninsula, Vilyachinsky Waterfall attracts visitors year-round. It's fed by the pristine waters of a nearby melting glacier. During the winter, the 130-foot, 40 meters cascade of water freezes into a collection of massive icicles. It's an absolutely beautiful sight, but things can quickly get ugly if you get too close to it, as one group of tourists recently learned. During a visit to the site earlier this year, a group of 7 visitors and their guide became perilously trapped in ice after massive icicles broke off and fell from the frozen waterfall. At least one person was killed. Several were pulled back from the scene by quick-thinking bystanders, including a gravely wounded child. 4 people were left trapped as they awaited rescue. The government dispatched a helicopter to the scene, along with a team of more than 40 medics, investigators, and rescuers. At the time of reporting, 2 adults and a seriously injured child had been flown to the hospital. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to dig the remaining stranded tourists out from beneath the ice. An investigation into the cause of the catastrophic collapse is ongoing. Number 7. White Island Eruption. Located off New Zealand's North Island in the Bay of Plenty, White Island is an active volcano and a popular tourist attraction. Naturally, this kind of tourism comes with risks. But experts monitor seismic activity in the area so that they can warn the public of any dangers, which is exactly what they did in late 2019 when they raised the volcano's alert level. Unfortunately, tour companies failed to heed the caution and continued to take visitors to White Island. 2 weeks after the alert was issued, the volcano explosively erupted, spewing rock and ash into the air and killing 22 of the 47 people who were on the island at the time. 25 others were seriously injured, with most of them receiving intensive care for severe burns. American newlyweds Lauren Barham and Matthew Urey, who visited during their honeymoon cruise, described seeing nothing but pitch black as they took cover behind a rock in a desperate attempt to avoid the scalding ash and smoke. They suffered disfiguring burns and were placed in medically induced comas while they underwent skin grafts and reconstructive surgeries. The Ureys accused the cruise line and tour company of falsely advertising high safety standards and failing to prevent a needless catastrophe. And they're not the only ones who feel this way. In addition to facing numerous civil lawsuits, several companies and individuals are facing criminal charges for their alleged responsibility in the tragic disaster. Number 6. Bus crash in Bulgaria. A group of more than 50 tourists were riding through Bulgaria on their way back to North Macedonia after a trip to Turkey late last year, when their bus crashed into a barrier and erupted into flames. The accident happened along the Struma motorway near the village of Bosnak in the early morning hours. 7 people who jumped out of the vehicle were injured but survived. 45 others suffocated in the blaze, with their lifeless bodies turning to charcoal by the time the fire was extinguished. They were burned beyond recognition, making it extremely difficult to identify their remains. It was one of the deadliest bus accidents in the country's recent history and the deadliest European crash in the last decade. While the cause of the accident remains unclear, investigators believe that human error was responsible. Bulgarian Prime Minister Stefan Yanev was one of many politicians from different countries who expressed their dismay at the loss of life. He called on the public to learn lessons from the tragic incident to prevent such incidents in the future. Number 5. Gunfire in Paradise. Tourists were enjoying themselves on the pristine sands of Cancun late last year when a group of men pulled up on jet skis and began firing bullets into the air. The beachgoers ran for cover, and thankfully nobody was injured. Rick Labasa, who was visiting from Maine, told NBC5 that in 31 years of vacationing in Cancun, it was the first time he had ever seen an incident like this. He took a surprisingly nonchalant attitude toward the ordeal, explaining that because he had never experienced any issues before, he wasn't overly concerned about it. But not everyone was left unshaken by the random display of gunfire. A pair of tourists from Minnesota named Andy Gyrich and Kerry Arms described the moment they scrambled for safety while watching panicked, screaming and crying guests do the same. Police found and seized the jet skis, but the criminals remained at large. The disturbing incident came amid a noticeable uptick in violence along Mexico's resort-lined Caribbean coast, which had gotten bad enough for the military to be called in to help protect the area. Just weeks earlier, members of a drug gang had stormed the nearby beach at Puerto Morelos and opened fire outside luxury hotels, killing 2 rival gang members. Sadly, these life-threatening encounters are becoming more frequent as cartels fight for control over the area's highly profitable drug trade. But the violence is tarnishing the region's reputation for safety and tranquility, which is what draws so many visitors in the first place. In that sense, the warring drug dealers are risking driving away their own customer base. Number 4. Table Rock Lake Tragedy. The DUKW, or Duck Boat, is an amphibious vehicle that was used by the US and its allies during World War II and the Korean War. After the boats were taken out of service, they became popular in several cities as a fun way to show tourists around. But there have been numerous fatal accidents involving duck boats, leading many to question whether they should be allowed to operate. The latest tragedy to call the vehicle's safety into question came in 2018 when a duck boat entered Table Rock Lake in the Missouri Ozarks despite a severe thunderstorm warning in the area. By then, winds had already hit 60 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, causing 3-foot, 1-meter waves. Within minutes, the vehicle began to sink as passengers desperately tried to escape. 17 people between the ages of 1 and 70 years old died. Tia Coleman, who lost 9 family members in the accident, told investigators that the crew had told passengers not to wear life jackets because they wouldn't need them. The boat's captain, Kenneth Scott McKee, was accused of failing to properly assess the weather before setting out on the lake. In 2020, a judge dismissed federal charges relating to McKee's alleged role in the tragedy. Determined to achieve justice for the victims, state authorities charged the captain and 2 other employees with 17 counts of involuntary manslaughter last July. The defendants asked a judge to dismiss the charges, arguing a lack of probable cause. They'll find out sometime this year if they'll face a criminal trial. Number 3. Stranded in a snowstorm. Located in northern Pakistan, the mountainside resort town of Murree attracts more tourists than it can handle, often leaving officials with no other choice than to limit how many vehicles are allowed to enter. Shortly into the new year, an estimated 100,000 or more visitors flocked to Murree to catch a glimpse of the winter snowfall, and for some reason, authorities failed to regulate the traffic. The town's streets became unbearably congested as a traffic jam formed on the outskirts. Thousands of cars became stranded, bumper to bumper, as a blizzard pounded the region with 5 feet, 1.5 meters of snow in just a few hours and knocked trees into the roads. Many tourists abandoned their vehicles and sought shelter at guest houses and any other warm buildings that would welcome them. Others languished in their cars without much needed food, warmth, and medical care. Emergency workers struggled to reach the scene as they found themselves caught in the traffic jams. The government summoned the military to Murree, but by the time help came, it was too late to save the 22 people who died in the disaster. Most of the individuals who perished froze to death, while some asphyxiated from inhaling toxic exhaust fumes. It took the military 2 days to rescue all the stranded survivors and fully clear the roads. Many survivors were left wondering why authorities allowed the mass stranding to happen. They reported receiving no emergency weather warnings and said that they thought it was perfectly safe to travel to Murree. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan and the Punjab provincial government ordered an investigation into the ordeal to determine whether there was a failure to issue extreme weather warnings to the public or to regulate traffic coming into Murree. Number 2. Crushed in a canal. When a 50-year-old German law professor named Joachim Vogel and his wife took their 3 kids on a family trip to Venice in 2013, the last thing they expected was to go home with one less family member. But that's unfortunately what happened after a leisurely gondola ride through the city's canals turned deadly. The small boat collided with a water bus, or vaporetto, and Vogel was crushed to death. An investigation found traces of cocaine and marijuana in the gondolier's blood, but his handling of the boat did not appear to be a factor in the accident. Vogel's widow claimed that the larger vessel's operator didn't even notice when it hit the gondola her family was riding in. She questioned why there wasn't an extra pair of eyes at the stern, or why the boat wasn't equipped with more mirrors and cameras for safe maneuvering. It took a tragedy for officials to realize that traffic among the Venetian waterways desperately needed stricter oversight, especially as increased tourism clogged the canals more than ever before. Former city-appointed gondolier representative Aldo Rosso told The Guardian he was surprised that a deadly accident like this hadn't happened sooner. He went on to say that people do whatever they want on the canals. The city's mayor, Giorgio Orsoni, was quick to crack down on the congestion problem. Less than a month after Vogel was killed, Orsoni proposed 26 new measures to prevent more needless tragedies from happening, including drug and alcohol tests for boat handlers, an increased police presence, and a cutback on the number of gondolas that are allowed in the parts of the canal that tend to be the most crowded. Not everyone agreed on who was at fault for congestion in the canals. Gondoliers accused vaporetto operators of traveling at unsafe speeds and failing to pay enough attention to the presence of smaller boats. Vaporetto operators claimed that gondoliers get in the way without any consideration for other vessels. Thankfully, there haven't been any similar fatal crashes since the collision that claimed Vogel's life. Number 1. Igal Tisman. A honeymoon is supposed to mark the beginning of a lifetime of wedded bliss, but for newlyweds Shia Frankel and Igal Tisman, the experience proved to be life-shattering. After tying the knot in 2018, the couple took a Caribbean cruise on the allure of the seas. Their fun came to a screeching halt during a ziplining excursion at a port stop in Honduras when Frankel got stuck on the line. Unable to stop on time, her husband crashed into her and died. The tragedy came amid a slew of allegations about unsafe conditions from others who had been injured on the ziplining excursion. They accused Royal Caribbean of failing to disclose that the activity was run by a separate company and falsely advertising top-notch safety standards. Past incidents revealed a troubling history marked by faulty brake systems, poor visibility, and poor communication among staff members between platforms. Several people crashed into platforms, in some cases resulting in gruesome injuries that exposed bone, muscle, and tendon. Other cases involved zipliners slamming into each other, often because there were too many people on the line at the same time. In one incident, 15 people got stuck on the line before employees even realized that something was wrong. Frankel sued Royal Caribbean for over $1 million in damages, but no amount of money could bring her husband back or heal the emotional wounds from his loss. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get stranded in a traffic jam for 3 days straight or endure a 10-hour flight with no bathroom? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.